The morning sun burned hot over the red dirt of New Colorado when Lisa Rodriguez found him lying face down in the sand. She had been checking the water pumps near the old mining site when something caught her eye. At first she thought it was just another piece of scrap metal from the abandoned equipment, but then she saw the rise and fall of breathing. Lisa dropped her tools and ran toward the figure. Sprawled in the dust, the man was tall and lean with dark hair streaked with silver. Deep scars crossed his arms and face like a map of old battles. But what made Lisa step back in shock were the metal pieces built into his skin. Silver and black circuits ran along his neck and disappeared under his torn shirt. His left eye was different too, glowing faintly blue even though he was unconscious. Lisa knelt beside him and checked for a pulse. His heartbeat was strong, but slow, almost like he was in some kind of deep sleep. She tried to lift him, but he was heavier than he looked. The metal parts made him weigh much more than a normal person. She ran back to her truck and called for help on the radio. Doc Peterson arrived first in his old medical transport. He was followed by Sheriff Dan Walsh and 3 other ranchers from the settlement. They all gathered around the unconscious stranger with wide eyes. Doc Peterson ran his scanner over the man and shook his head in disbelief. "These readings don't make sense," he muttered. "His body temperature is too low, his blood pressure is too steady, and look at these metal implants. This is military-grade enhancement technology, the kind they only give to Special Forces soldiers." Sheriff Walsh frowned as he studied the man's face. Something about those features looked familiar, but he could not place where he had seen them before. "We need to get him to the medical center," he said. "And we need to contact the Defense Command. This guy is no ordinary drifter." They loaded the stranger onto Doc Peterson's transport and drove back to town. Word spread quickly through the small settlement of 3,000 people. By evening, half the town had gathered outside the medical center, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious visitor. Inside the medical bay, the stranger slept for 3 days. Doc Peterson ran every test he could think of, but the results only raised more questions. The man's body showed signs of extreme trauma that should have killed him years ago. The metal implants were connected directly to his nervous system in ways that seemed impossible. Most strange of all, his brain showed unusual activity patterns even while unconscious. On the 3rd night, old veteran Kenny Clark was sitting guard duty when recognition hit him like a lightning bolt. He stared at the sleeping man's face and felt his hands start to shake. Kenny had served in the HFY War 20 years ago. He had seen this face before in military briefings and news reports. This was Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morrison, the ghost of Kepler Prime himself. Kenny stumbled out of the medical center and ran straight to Sheriff Walsh's office. "Dan, you need to see this," he gasped, pulling up old military files on his tablet. "I know who that man is. Look at these pictures from the war." Sheriff Walsh compared the photos to his memory of the unconscious stranger. The face was older now and marked by more scars, but there was no doubt. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Jake Morrison died at the Battle of Kepler Prime. I watched the memorial service myself." "Maybe he didn't die," Kenny said. "Maybe something else happened." "To whom?" The next morning brought visitors from off-world. A military transport ship landed at the settlement's small spaceport. Admiral Kevin Blake himself stepped out along with a team of soldiers and medical specialists. Blake was a thin man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. He had been Morrison's commanding officer during the war. Blake went straight to the medical center and stood over the sleeping figure for a long time. His face showed no emotion, but his hands clenched into fists. "Seal this building," he ordered. His soldiers, "No one gets in or out without my permission." Doc Peterson protested, but Blake's men pushed him aside. "This is now a military matter," Blake announced. "Anyone who speaks about this to outsiders will be arrested for violating security protocols." That same evening, as Blake's team ran their own tests, the stranger's blue eye suddenly opened. Jake Morrison looked around the room with confusion and pain. 20 years of memories came flooding back in broken pieces. He remembered the war, the final battle, and then nothing but darkness and the sound of alien voices. Morrison tried to sit up, but found his arms strapped to the medical bed. The restraints were military grade, designed to hold enhanced soldiers. He tested their strength and felt the metal implants in his body respond with new power. The straps began to strain against his pull. Outside his room, alarms started to sound. As the monitoring equipment detected his awakening, Blake rushed in with his soldiers, their weapons ready. Morrison looked at his old commander with eyes that held both recognition and wariness. "Hello, Kevin," Morrison said in a voice rough from years of silence. "I think we need to talk." 3 weeks after Morrison's awakening, the mining colony of Haven's Rest sent out a distress signal that echoed across 12 star systems. Security Chief Danny Walsh watched from his command center as enemy ships dropped from hyperspace like angry wasps. The Korthax Syndicate had come to collect their tribute, but this time they wanted more than just mining rights. The alien raiders moved with military precision as they landed, their assault craft near the main settlement. Danny counted at least 200 Korthax soldiers pouring out of the ships. Each one stood 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like black leather. Their weapons fired energy bolts that could cut through steel walls like paper. "All units fall back to the community center," Danny ordered over his radio. His security force of 30 men was no match for a full Korthax war party. They had maybe an hour before the aliens overran their defenses and started taking hostages. The colonists ran through the streets carrying whatever they could save. Children cried as their parents dragged them toward the emergency shelters. Danny's men set up defensive positions, but their small arms fire barely scratched the aliens' advanced armor. The Korthax moved forward like an unstoppable wave. Just when Danny thought all hope was lost, a stolen transport ship screamed overhead and landed hard in the town square. The cargo door dropped open and a single figure walked out. Danny recognized the man from the reports coming out of New Colorado. Jake Morrison had somehow escaped Admiral Blake's custody and made his way here. Morrison carried no weapons except for a simple combat knife strapped to his leg. He wore basic civilian clothes and moved with the calm confidence of someone who had faced impossible odds before. The Korthax soldiers turned their attention to this new threat and opened fire with everything they had. What happened next defied all military logic. Morrison seemed to flow between the energy bolts like water moving around rocks. He reached the first group of aliens before they could reload and turn their own weapons against them. His enhanced reflexes let him move faster than human eyes could follow. Morrison grabbed a fallen Korthax rifle and used it to take down 6 more enemies before the weapon overheated. He threw the useless gun aside and picked up an alien grenade launcher. The explosive rounds cleared a path through the enemy ranks as Morrison advanced toward their command post, the Korthax commander, a massive alien with golden armor and ceremonial. Scars stepped forward to face Morrison in single combat. The creature roared a challenge in its harsh native language and raised a weapon that looked like a cross between a sword and an energy. Cannon. Morrison said nothing as he dodged the alien's first strike and rolled behind a damaged hovercar. The commander's weapon turned the vehicle into molten slag, but Morrison was already moving again. He used the environment like a puzzle, turning every piece of debris into a weapon or shield. A broken pipe became a spear that found the gap in the commander's armor. A damaged power cell became an improvised bomb that took out 3 more soldiers. Morrison fought like he knew exactly where each enemy would move before they made their decision. Danny Walsh watched the battle from his position behind the barricades. His security team had stopped shooting because they could not tell where Morrison would be from one second to the next. The man moved through the battlefield like a ghost made solid, appearing where he was needed most. The turning point came when Morrison reached the Korthax communication array. Instead of destroying it, he somehow interfaced with the alien technology using the metal implants in his hands. Within seconds, he had turned their own command system against them. Orders went out in the Korthax language telling different units to fire on each other. Confusion spread through the alien ranks as their coordination broke down. Morrison had turned their greatest advantage, their unified command structure, into a weakness. Squads of Korthax soldiers began fighting each other while Morrison picked off the survivors. The entire battle lasted less than 30 minutes. When the smoke cleared, Morrison stood alone among the wreckage of the enemy force. His clothes were torn and burned, but he showed no serious injuries. The metal implants along his arms glowed softly as they finished repairing minor damage to his body. Danny Walsh emerged from cover with his men and approached Morrison carefully. The man who had just saved their colony looked exhausted but alert. His blue cybernetic eye scanned the area for remaining threats while his human eye focused on the approaching security team. "Are you really him?" Danny asked quietly. "Are you the ghost of Kepler Prime?" Morrison looked at the grateful faces of the colonists emerging from their shelters. Children ran to their parents while adults stared at him with a mixture of awe and fear. He had saved them all, but at what cost to himself? The battle had awakened something dark in his enhanced mind, memories of violence that felt more alien than human. "I used to be," Morrison replied. "Now I'm not sure what I am." An old man pushed through the crowd and stopped in front of Morrison. It was Rick Campbell, now gray-haired and walking with a limp from an old war wound. Rick had served as Morrison's sergeant major during the HFY War. He looked into his former commander's eyes and saw both the man he remembered and something new and strange. "Jake," Rick said simply, "it's good to see you again." Morrison smiled for the first time since his awakening. "Hello, Rick. Sorry I'm late for the reunion." But even as they talked, Morrison's enhanced senses picked up new signals from space. More ships were coming, and this time they would be ready for him. The Korthax Syndicate did not forget their defeats, and they had a long memory for revenge. Deep in the dark reaches of the Korthax home system, Vextar the Merciless studied the battle reports from Haven's Rest with growing fury. The massive alien warlord stood 12 feet tall with armor grafted directly into his bones. Scars from 100 battles covered his black hide, and his 4 eyes burned with hatred older than most civilizations. "One human," he growled to his assembled war chiefs. "One human destroyed an entire raiding party." Vextar crushed the datapad in his massive claws and threw the pieces across his command chamber. "This is the same creature that cost us the HFY War 20 years ago." The war chiefs shifted nervously as their supreme commander's rage filled the room. They had all heard stories of the human called Morrison, tales that seemed too impossible to believe. Now those stories had proven true, and their carefully planned expansion into human space was threatened by a single soldier. "Send the hunters," Vextar commanded. "All 12 packs. I want Morrison taken alive so I can kill him myself." Meanwhile, Morrison had found temporary sanctuary aboard the research station Omega-7, a small facility orbiting the gas giant Titan V. Dr. Amy Chun, a young xenobiologist with short black hair and intelligent brown eyes, ran every scan her equipment could manage on Morrison's enhanced body. "These implants are unlike anything in our medical databases," she told him as holographic displays showed the intricate network of alien technology woven through his nervous system. "They're not just enhancing your abilities, they're rewriting your basic biology at the cellular level." Morrison sat on the examination table and studied the scans with growing unease. The metal threads ran deeper than he had realized, connecting to parts of his brain that controlled memory and emotion. "What does that mean exactly?" Amy hesitated before answering. "It means whoever did this to you didn't just make you stronger and faster, they programmed you like a weapon. There are command protocols buried in your neural pathways that could be activated remotely." The implications hit Morrison like a physical blow. For 3 weeks he had believed he was free, that he had escaped his captors and returned to fight for humanity. Now he discovered he might be nothing more than an elaborate trap, a sleeper agent designed to infiltrate and destroy human settlements from within. "Can you remove them?" he asked quietly. "Not without killing you," Amy replied. "The integration is too complete, but I might be able to help you resist outside control if we can map the command structures." Their conversation was interrupted by alarms throughout the station. The hunters had arrived, and they brought terror with them. These were not ordinary Korthax soldiers, but specially bred killers created for a single purpose. Each hunter stood 9 feet tall with elongated limbs and razor-sharp claws. Their skin could change color to match any environment, and their enhanced senses could track a target across light years. Station Commander Lisa Park ordered all civilians to the emergency shelters while her small security team took defensive positions. Morrison knew their weapons would be useless against creatures designed to hunt the most dangerous prey in the galaxy. He had to draw the hunters away from the innocent people on the station. Morrison commandeered a maintenance shuttle and launched into space just as the hunter ships began their attack on Omega-7. His plan was simple: make himself an irresistible target and lead the creatures away from the research station. What he did not expect was how efficiently they would adapt to his tactics. The chase began in the asteroid field surrounding Titan V. Morrison used the floating rocks as cover while the hunters pursued him in their sleek combat craft. Their ships moved like living things, flowing around obstacles with fluid grace. Morrison had to push his enhanced reflexes to their limits just to stay ahead of their weapons, but Morrison had advantages they did not expect. His implants let him interface directly with the shuttle's computer systems, giving him control that no normal pilot could achieve. He turned the small craft into an extension of his own body, making turns that should have torn the ship apart. The real battle began when Morrison deliberately crashed his shuttle on the largest asteroid in the field. The hunters followed him down, expecting an easy kill on solid ground. Instead, they found themselves facing a human who had turned the entire asteroid into a weapon. Morrison had studied the composition scans during his approach. The asteroid was rich in volatile minerals and honeycombed with natural caves. He used explosive charges from the shuttle to trigger controlled avalanches that buried several hunters under tons of rock. Others fell into pits he had hastily prepared. Using the shuttle's mining laser, the surviving hunters quickly learned that Morrison fought unlike any enemy they had encountered before. He did not rely on superior strength or advanced weapons. Instead, he used intelligence and adaptability to turn every element of the environment against his pursuers. When the hunters tried to use their natural camouflage, Morrison detected them by reading the thermal patterns their bodies created in the asteroid's thin atmosphere. When they attempted to surround him, he collapsed sections of the cave system to force them into single-file attacks where their numbers meant nothing. The final hunter was the pack leader, a creature so perfectly adapted to killing that it had never failed to bring down its prey. It cornered Morrison in a dead-end cavern and prepared to finish the hunt that had taken them. Across 3 star systems, Morrison stood his ground as the creature approached, its claws extended and its fangs gleaming in the dim light. At the last second, he activated a device he had cobbled together from shuttle components and asteroid minerals. The makeshift weapon created a localized electromagnetic pulse that overloaded the hunter's enhanced nervous system. As the creature collapsed, Morrison felt something change in his own mind. The violence of the hunt had awakened dormant programming in his implants. For a moment, alien thoughts and memories flooded his consciousness. He saw glimpses of the facility where he had been held, the experiments performed on his body and mind, and the true purpose for which he had been designed. The revelation left him shaken as he made his way back to Omega-7. Dr. Chun's scans had been correct. He was a weapon created by humanity's enemies and aimed at humanity's heart. The question now was whether he could resist his programming long enough to warn others of the danger he represented, or if he would become the very threat he had spent his life fighting against. Admiral Kevin Blake arrived at Omega-7 with the largest battle fleet humanity had assembled in 20 years. 50 warships surrounded the research station in a formation that could level entire planets. Blake's flagship, the massive dreadnought, Titan's Hammer, docked directly with the station's main port. Morrison watched from the observation deck as Blake's soldiers secured every corridor and access point. The Admiral himself strode through the airlock wearing his full dress uniform with all the medals and ribbons of a career spent in service to humanity. His cold blue eyes found Morrison immediately. "Colonel Morrison," Blake said with formal military courtesy, "it's time you came home?" Something in Blake's tone made Morrison's enhanced senses go on high alert. The Admiral's heartbeat was elevated, his breathing patterns showed stress, and tiny muscle movements around his eyes indicated deception. Morrison had learned to read these signs during his captivity, though he could not remember exactly how. Or why, what kind of homecoming are you offering, Kevin? Morrison asked carefully. Blake gestured toward the assembled fleet visible through the station's windows. Full reinstatement with honors, a new command position, the chance to serve humanity. As you always have. He paused and his voice took on a harder edge. The only alternative is arrest for desertion and violation of military security protocols. Dr. Amy Chin stepped forward from where she had been listening to the conversation. Admiral Colonel Morrison is still recovering from 20 years of imprisonment and experimentation. He needs medical treatment, not another military assignment. Blake's expression showed barely controlled irritation as he looked at the young scientist. Dr. Chun, your research on alien biotechnology has been noted by Defense Command. We'll be transferring your work to more secure facilities where it can be properly evaluated. Morrison caught the subtle threat in Blake's words. Amy's research into his implants had revealed too much about alien capabilities and human vulnerabilities. Blake intended to bury her findings along with anyone who knew too much about Morrison's condition. I need some time to consider your offer, Morrison said diplomatically. Of course, Blake replied. Take all the time you need. My ships will wait here to ensure your safety while you decide. Over the following days, Morrison discovered the true nature of Blake's protection. The Admiral's soldiers had effectively placed the entire station under military lockdown. No communications could leave without approval, and anyone who tried to discuss Morrison's case found themselves facing questioning by security personnel. Morrison turned to the only allies he could trust, the station's communication officer Helen Brooks and intelligence analyst Peter Kane. Both were veterans who had served during the HFY War and remembered what Morrison had once meant to humanity's survival. Helen was a small woman with red hair and sharp green eyes who could work miracles with any communication system ever built. Peter was tall and thin with a quiet manner that hid one of the sharpest tactical minds in the fleet. Together they began investigating Blake's true intentions. Something doesn't add up, Peter told Morrison during a secret meeting in the station's maintenance sections. Blake brought 50 ships to collect one man. That's enough firepower to conquer a small star system. Helen had been monitoring encrypted communications between Blake's flagship and unknown recipients. The Admiral is definitely talking to someone outside the Defense Command chain. The encryption is military grade, but the transmission patterns don't match any human communication protocols I know. Morrison felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. Blake's nervousness, the overwhelming military response, the attempts to control information about the alien implants, it all pointed to a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of human government. The truth came out when Helen managed to crack one of Blake's encrypted transmissions. The message was short but devastating. Morrison is secured. Proceed with territorial negotiations as planned. Payment will be transferred upon delivery. Blake had been negotiating with the Korthax Syndicate, trading Morrison's capture for promises of peace and territorial concessions. In the Admiral's mind, sacrificing one soldier to prevent a galactic war was not just acceptable but necessary for humanity's survival. He's going to hand you over to the same aliens who held you captive for 20 years, Helen said with disgust. How can he call himself a human officer? Morrison understood Blake's logic even as it sickened him. The Admiral saw the bigger picture. Humanity was outnumbered and outgunned by the alien civilizations that surrounded their small pocket of space. Making deals with their enemies seemed like the only way to buy time and avoid extinction. Blake believes he's saving humanity by sacrificing me, Morrison explained. The question is whether he's right. Peter shook his head firmly. You can't build peace on betrayal. If we hand you over now, what happens the next time they demand someone else? Where does it end? Morrison made his decision that night. Blake's path led only to surrender disguised as diplomacy. Humanity needed leaders who would fight for their values, not trade them away for temporary safety. He would have to escape the Admirals trap and find another way forward. The breakout began during the station's night cycle when most of Blake's soldiers were off duty. Morrison used his enhanced abilities to disable the security systems while Helen and Peter created false signals to confuse the monitoring equipment. They made their way to the station's small craft bay where a maintenance shuttle waited. Blake discovered the escape within minutes and responded with overwhelming force. His ships surrounded the shuttle as it launched from Omega-7, their weapons charged and ready to fire. Morrison found himself trapped between the station's defense grid and the massed firepower of humanity's finest warships. "This is Admiral Blake," came the voice over the communication system. "Colonel Morrison, you are ordered to return to the station immediately. Any attempt to flee will be considered an act of treason against humanity." Morrison looked at his companions and saw the same determination in their eyes that had once driven him to victory against impossible odds. "Sometimes treason is the highest form of patriotism," he replied over the open channel. The chase that followed would become legend among those who survived to tell it. Morrison pushed the shuttle beyond its design limits while Blake's fighters pursued him through the asteroid field surrounding Titan V, but Morrison had advantages the Admiral had not considered. Knowledge of alien technology gained during his captivity and allies who believed in something more important than following orders. Helen managed to contact veterans scattered across a dozen star systems, men and women who remembered what Morrison had once fought for. Peter coordinated with sympathetic officers within Blake's own fleet, people who questioned their Admiral's willingness to negotiate with humanity's enemies. As Morrison's shuttle disappeared into hyperspace, Blake realized he had lost more than just one escaped prisoner. He had created a symbol of resistance that would inspire others to question the price of peace bought with betrayal. Vextar the Merciless had grown tired of subtle hunting and careful plans. The massive Korthax warlord stood on the bridge of his flagship, Deathbringer, and watched as his war fleet dropped out of hyperspace above the human colony of New Haven. 300 ships filled the space around the peaceful world like a swarm of metal predators. "Send the message," Vextar commanded his communications officer. The transmission went out on all human frequencies, carrying words that would shake humanity to its core. "I am Vextar of the Korthax Syndicate," the warlord's voice boomed across space. "I have come for the human called Morrison. If he does not surrender within one solar rotation, I will begin destroying your colonies one by one until he presents himself. The choice is his, one life or millions." On New Haven below, 2 million colonists looked up at the alien fleet with growing terror. Governor Maria Santos tried to maintain order, but panic spread through the cities as people realized their world had become a bargaining chip in a conflict they barely understood. Morrison received the transmission aboard the stolen freighter Wanderer, hidden in the asteroid belt of the Proxima system. His small crew of allies had grown over the past month as word spread through underground networks. Veterans, smugglers, discharged soldiers, and civilian volunteers had answered his call, united by the belief that some things were worth fighting for regardless of the odds. Captain Tony Rodriguez, a former Navy pilot who had lost his commission for refusing to fire on civilian protesters, served as Morrison's second in command. Chief Engineer Sarah Kim kept their collection of salvaged ships running despite lacking proper parts or maintenance facilities. Communications specialist Jake Turner maintained contact with sympathetic elements throughout human space. "We have maybe 40 ships total," Tony reported as Morrison studied the tactical displays. "Half of them are civilian vessels with improvised weapons. Against Vextar's fleet, we're looking at odds of nearly 8 to 1. Morrison nodded calmly as he calculated their chances. The numbers were impossible by any reasonable standard, but he had learned long ago that reasonable standards did not apply when humanity's survival was at stake. "Numbers don't tell the whole story," he said. "Vextar is expecting us to fight like humans. We're going to fight like something else entirely." The plan Morrison outlined defied every principle of conventional space warfare. Instead of engaging the enemy fleet in direct battle, they would use captured alien technology and human ingenuity to turn the Korthax's own systems against them. Morrison's implants gave him the ability to interface with alien computers in ways no human had ever achieved before. The Korthax rely on centralized command and control, Morrison explained to his assembled captains. Every ship in their fleet receives orders from Vexstar-S flagship. If we can infiltrate their network, we can create chaos throughout their entire formation. The attack began with a suicide run by Morrison's fastest ships. They screamed toward the alien fleet at maximum velocity, drawing fire from hundreds of weapons while broadcasting false surrender signals. The Korthax had expected such a desperate gesture and positioned their forces to intercept the approaching vessels. What they did not expect was for Morrison to be aboard one of the attacking ships himself. While the enemy focused on stopping his apparent suicide mission, Morrison ejected in a specially modified escape pod that his enhanced reflexes guided through the defensive fire toward Vexstar-S flagship. The pod's stealth systems, built from captured alien technology, made it nearly invisible to Korthax sensors. Morrison used his implants to hack the ship's docking bay controls and slipped inside the massive vessel like a ghost infiltrating a fortress. Once aboard the Deathbringer, Morrison became something beyond human understanding. His alien enhancements allowed him to move through the ship's corridors without triggering security systems, while his tactical genius guided him toward the central command center. Every step awakened more dormant programming in his implants, giving him access to Korthax tactical knowledge and technical specifications. Morrison reached the ship's main computer core and connected his implants directly to the alien systems. What followed was a battle fought in cyberspace as Morrison's enhanced consciousness wrestled with security programs designed to stop exactly this kind of infiltration. The alien programmers who had modified his mind had built-in capabilities they never intended him to use against their own people. The effects rippled through the Korthax fleet as Morrison gained control of their communication networks. Orders went out in Vexstar-S' own voice, telling different squadrons to change formation and redirect fire. Ships began targeting their own allies as Morrison fed false sensor data into their targeting computers. Confusion spread through the alien formation as their rigid command structure turned against them. Morrison had learned during his captivity that the Korthax valued obedience above initiative. Their crews followed orders without question, even when those orders made no tactical sense. While Morrison created chaos in the enemy fleet, his own ships pressed their attack with renewed coordination. Tony Rodriguez led the fighter squadrons through gaps in the alien formation that Morrison created by redirecting their defensive fire. Sarah Kim's engineering teams used portable devices to broadcast computer viruses that further degraded enemy systems. The turning point came when Vexstar realized his own ship had been compromised. The warlord stormed through his vessel's corridors with a squad of elite guards, hunting for the saboteur who was destroying his fleet from within. His enhanced senses led him directly to the computer core where Morrison waited. "Human," Vexstar growled as he entered the chamber. "You have caused me much trouble. Now you will pay for every ship, every warrior you have cost my people." Morrison disconnected from the alien computer and turned to face his nemesis. The massive warlord stood, twice his height with arms like tree trunks and claws that could tear through steel. But Morrison's implants had awakened fully during the cyber battle, giving him access to combat programming designed by the Korthax's own weapon masters. "You made me into this," Morrison replied. "Now face what you created." The fight that followed shook the entire ship as two perfectly designed killers tested their limits against each other. Vexstar-S brute strength and natural weapons met. Morrison's enhanced speed and tactical brilliance in a contest that would determine the fate of both their species. Morrison used every surface and object in the chamber as a weapon or shield, turning the warlord's own strength against him. When Vexstar-S claws tore through metal bulkheads, Morrison used the torn edges to slice at exposed joints in the alien's natural armor. When the warlord's massive arms swept through the air, Morrison flowed around the attacks like water finding its way through rock. The battle ended when Morrison managed to turn one of the ship's own security systems against Vexstar. An emergency containment field designed to stop hull breaches trapped the warlord long enough for Morrison to reach the ship's self-destruct system. As explosions began tearing through the Deathbringer, Morrison made his way to an escape pod, while Vexstar's roars of fury echoed through the dying vessel. The destruction of Vexstar's flagship sent shockwaves through the remaining Korthax fleet. Without their supreme commander and with their communication systems still compromised by Morrison's sabotage, the alien ships scattered in all directions. Some fled back to their home territories while others simply drifted in space as their crews struggled to regain control of their vessels. Morrison's escape pod was recovered by Tony Rodriguez's fighter squadron as they mopped up the last pockets of enemy resistance. When the rescue team opened the pod, they found Morrison unconscious and bleeding from wounds that should have been fatal. The battle with Vexstar had pushed his enhanced body beyond its limits, but the alien technology in his bloodstream was already working to repair the damage. Dr. Amy Chun arrived aboard the medical ship Sanctuary within hours of the battle's end. Her examination revealed that Morrison's fight with the Korthax warlord had triggered a final activation sequence in his implants. Dormant systems throughout his body were coming online, giving him access to memories and knowledge that spanned centuries of alien civilization. The programming in your neural pathways has fundamentally changed, Amy explained as Morrison recovered in the medical bay. You're not just enhanced now, you're something entirely new. The aliens who held you captive built you to be a bridge between species, though they never intended you to use that capability for humanity's benefit. Morrison could feel the changes happening in his mind as alien memories integrated with his human consciousness. He understood Korthax military tactics, Zephyrian social structures, and the political relationships between dozens of species he had never encountered. The knowledge was overwhelming but also liberating, showing him possibilities for peace that existed beyond the endless cycle of war and conquest. The news of Vexstar's defeat spread through human space faster than any military communication network could carry it. Admiral Blake's betrayal was exposed when captured Korthax records revealed his secret negotiations. The scandal brought down the current Defense Command leadership and sparked calls for new policies based on strength rather than appeasement. Colonel Susan Martinez, one of Morrison's former students from the military academy, was promoted to admiral and given command of the reformed defense fleet. Her first official act was to pardon Morrison and his followers for their actions against Blake's forces. Her second was to offer Morrison any command position he wanted in the new military structure. Morrison declined the offer during a ceremony aboard the orbital station above New Colorado. Representatives from across human space had gathered to honor the man who had saved them from both alien conquest and their own government's willingness to surrender. Morrison stood before the assembled crowd in simple civilian clothes, looking uncomfortable with the attention but understanding its necessity. "I appreciate the honor you're offering," he told Admiral Martinez in front of the cameras broadcasting across human space. "But I've learned that some battles can't be won from inside official command structures. Sometimes you need to stay on the outside where you can see problems that others miss." Instead of accepting a military command, Morrison chose a different path. He returned to New Colorado and established a training academy on the same plains where Lisa Rodriguez had first found him 20 years earlier. The academy would teach the next generation of soldiers not just combat techniques but the importance of adaptability, independent thinking, and moral courage. Veterans from across the galaxy came to learn from the man who had proven that impossible. Victories were achievable through intelligence, determination, and willingness to sacrifice everything for the right cause. Students included humans, reformed pirates, alien defectors, and even former enemies who had recognized the value of Morrison's approach to warfare. Rick Campbell, now recovered from his war injuries through advanced medical treatment, served as the Academy's senior instructor. Helen Brooks and Peter Kane established an intelligence network that monitored threats to human settlements throughout the frontier regions. Tony Rodriguez led training flights for the Academy's pilot program while Sarah Kim taught engineering students how to turn any piece of technology into a weapon when necessary. Morrison himself spent most of his time in the field, responding to distress calls from colonies under attack or investigating reports of alien activity near human space. His enhanced abilities made him uniquely qualified to handle situations that regular military forces could not manage, while his growing understanding of alien cultures helped him find peaceful solutions when violence was not necessary. The Academy became a symbol of humanity's new approach to galactic relations. Instead of relying on superior firepower or diplomatic surrender, they would use intelligence, adaptability, and moral strength to secure their place among the stars. Morrison's students carried these lessons to colonies across human space, creating a network of defenders who could think beyond conventional military doctrine. On quiet evenings, Morrison would walk across the red plains of New Colorado and remember the man he had been before his capture and transformation. That person was gone forever, replaced by something that was both more and less than human, but the core values that had driven him to fight for humanity's survival remained unchanged, perhaps even strengthened by his understanding of what they faced in the galaxy. The transformation was complete when a new distress signal reached the Academy from the frontier colony of Far Haven. Pirates had taken hostages and were demanding ransom from the colonial government. Morrison gathered his gear and prepared to respond, knowing that this was just one of countless threats that would require his attention in the years to come. As he walked toward his transport ship, students and instructors gathered to watch their founder depart on another mission. They understood that Morrison could have chosen a comfortable retirement or a position of power within the government. Instead, he had chosen to keep walking forward into whatever dangers threatened innocent people. Morrison paused at the ship's boarding ramp and looked back at the academy he had built. New students were arriving daily, drawn by stories of the man who had faced impossible odds and found ways to victory. They would learn not just how to fight, but why fighting mattered, carrying those lessons to every corner of human space. The transport lifted off as the sun set over New Colorado, carrying Morrison toward another crisis that required his unique skills. Behind him, the Academy continued its work of preparing humanity's defenders for challenges that had not yet been imagined. Ahead lay the unknown dangers of a galaxy where legends walked among mortals and the fate of entire civilizations could rest on the choices of one person willing to keep moving forward.